we are at 85% of pre-pandemic ridership and still charging fare. So it's not we're running full service. So we're charging full fare, and we are at least 85% of pre-pandemic ridership. I think there are three factors, right, that attributed to our ridership figures. One is during the pandemic, we did not cut service. So unlike almost all other agencies, or at least most other agencies across the country, we did not cut a service. So that was a strategic decision from our CEO that no, we're going to keep running 100% service, even on weekends, because we still have people who want to get to their jobs, people who want to get to their hospitals, medical facilities, not only as patients, but also as workers.
Welcome to the Mobility Innovators Podcast.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Mobility Innovator Podcast. I'm your host, Jaspal Singh. Mobility Innovator Podcast invite key innovators in the transportation and logistics sector to share their experience and future forecast. In this episode, we'll be discussing the benefit of technology and innovation for public transit agencies in North America. Our today's guest is an amazing transit enthusiast. He's the Chief Strategic Planning, Development, and Innovation Officer at Southwest Ohio Regional Transit Authority, SORTA, or you can also call Go Metro. SORTA is a public transportation agency that provides bus service in the Greater Cincinnati area. He's responsible for overseeing the development and implementation of agency technology and data-driven strategy. He also leads the development of SORTA long-term strategic plan and work to enhance the agency's customer experience. Prior to SORTA, he has worked with different agencies in the US, including Central Ohio Transit Authority, Jacksonville Transportation Authority, and Palm Beach County. He was also the chief of bus transit team at Makkah Mass Rail Transit. I'm so happy to welcome Khaled Shammout, Chief Strategic Planning, Development, and Innovation Officer at Southwest Ohio Regional Transit Authority in Cincinnati. It's now time to listen and learn. Hello, Khaled. It's great to have you on the show. Looking forward to learning from your experience today.
Yes. Hi, Jasper. Thank you for having me.
Great. So today I'll be spending time to talk about your professional journey, which is quite interesting, your book, which I really loved, and your perspective on innovation in the public transit space, because there are not many people who will actually talk about this. So to start with, can you tell me a bit more about your background, which is very interesting? But I'm also interested to know any hidden fact about your career that is not on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I think it's easier to answer the first part really first. I went to the Ohio State University in Columbus, Ohio to study, where I pursued architecture degree as an undergraduate. And then I did the master's in regional planning, as well as a master's in transportation engineering. And then from there, just had to have the opportunity to do an internship at the transit agency in Columbus, Ohio.
Oh, okay.
And that's, I guess, how I fell in love with transit. And it's been a pretty rewarding journey. And after the transit agency in Columbus, I went into the private sector with a consulting firm, where I was lucky enough to work on projects, across the country, which, gave me another, quite a bit of additional experience. And then went to the public sector again in Florida, but also had the opportunity to work overseas twice. Once in Abu Dhabi, where I helped establish the transit sector within the newly established Abu Dhabi DOT, Department of Transportation. Okay. And more recently, I was really offered a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to design a transit system from scratch in Mecca, Saudi Arabia. These kind of opportunities really don't come that frequently because there aren't too many cities that don't have any transit.
Yeah.
And to be really put in charge of creating one was, an opportunity I would have done for free. And it was a very rewarding experience. As for anything unique, I think I have everything posted at LinkedIn, so I can't think of anything that's unique really. Yeah, I mean, if I think of something, I'll let you know.
Or probably during the discussion, we'll discover something. Like I discover about your experience with Abu Dhabi. I didn't know that you work in Abu Dhabi as well and help to set up the new transit agency, because I remember when in Dubai and in Abu Dhabi, the whole planning and transportation focus on public transportation started. There was these new agencies were created. So it's great that you help Abu Dhabi to build that. And Makkah, I can fully agree with you, is there are not many cities where you get an opportunity to start something from scratch. So
Indeed, yes.
great. Now, so I want to start our discussion with the transit recovery, because that's a very hot topic. And to do that, I went to the Go Metro website, SORTA website, and I found something very interesting. On your website, you publish month-on-month report of everything about the SORTA performance. I can see about ridership trend. I can see the cost detail. I can see KPIs. I can also see you transparently put about the driver shortage issue. All your success and failure are shared transparently with everybody. I mean, it's amazing, because I haven't seen many agencies who do that, put everything in public. The important thing I saw that SORTA is recovering quite well. I mean, you have already touched 85% mark, 85% ridership compared to 2019. It's not yet 100%, but it's still one of the highest, I would say, in the country, because in US, not many cities have reached this level. And you also mentioned one of your route has already exceed 165% ridership level. So which means it's already crossed the pre-pandemic level and growing.
Correct.
So I would love to know, what is your secret? What is the secret of SORTA, and what's your plan for 2023?
Great question, and thank you for that, Jasper. And indeed, we are really proud of our success story. And I just want to clarify that we are at 85% of pre-pandemic ridership and still charging fare. So it's not that we're running free service. So we're charging full fare, and we are at least 85% of pre-pandemic ridership. I think there are three factors, right, that attributed to our ridership figures. One is, during the pandemic, we did not cut service. So unlike almost all other agencies, or at least most other agencies across the country, we did not cut a service. So that was a strategic decision from our CEO that, no, we're going to keep running 100% service, even on weekends, because we still have people who want to get to their jobs, people who want to get to their hospitals, medical facilities, not only as patients, but also as workers, right? As well as to other jobs where, in the service industry, whether it's the grocery stores and warehousing and so on. So that was kind of a strategic decision on our part. There was only 1 month where we reduced the service, slightly, but that was just 1 month, if not less than a month. But we kept running 100%. That, I think, helped us maintain our riders. I mean, at the beginning of COVID, ridership plummeted to about 50-55%.
Yeah.
It's not like we kept carrying the same amount of people, but despite that, it still gave the confidence to the passengers that transit is still there. I may not be riding it today because I'm not going to the office anymore, but I know that this transit is still running, and I do not need to make any different transportation arrangements, down the road. So that was, one of the main factors, because had we cut service and, the reduced service didn't meet certain individuals' needs. Obviously, if they have to get to work, they would have found some other means to get there, buy a car, and so on. And if they do that, they're not coming back to transit. You've lost it. The other piece to that is we also redesigned portions of our network to make it more efficient and save some resources, drivers and buses. And then we took these resources and actually added service with them. So
amazing.
We ended up having more revenue hours and more revenue miles than before COVID. And again, those were also strategic, decisions. One is we were trying to implement our new system redesign, doing it, phase by phase. But also, phase 1 and phase 2 of these additional services that we added were directed at what the COVID environment needed at that time. So we converted 7 routes to run 24 hours. And those routes would hit the major hospitals because they're open 24 hours. You have third shift people there. And also the warehousing and the manufacturing areas where you have second and third shift. And those were also all critical things, where they did not stop during COVID, right?
Yeah.
So we added weekend service, Sunday service, improved frequency a little bit during, the weekdays. And we had 2 sets of these improvements. And you cited earlier that one of the routes is about 167% of pre-COVID ridership. And that particular route, in addition to 5 or 6 other routes that have exceeded pre-COVID ridership, are the ones that received these kind of improvements. So these are the routes that received either 24-hour service, Sunday service, weekend frequency improvements, or expanding the span of service and so on. So those routes that received these kind of improvements exceeded pre-COVID ridership. The other routes that received improvements, are also doing very well, 85, 90, 95%, and so on. I think the message of that, and that's the kind of thing that we used, in our discussions here, is that's the proof, when they say the proof is in the pudding, is that what that tells us is people want to ride transit.
Oh, yeah.
People want to ride the buses. So if you make it better, if you give them better service, they will ride. And hence, when we converted this to 24-hour service, we added weekend, etc. They're doing 134% of pre-COVID, 167% pre-COVID, 118% pre-COVID, and so on. So that was really a strong message for us, and that gave us, the enthusiasm to keep making these additional improvements.
Amazing. I mean, all your points are so powerful, and I agree with you. People want to use transit. Why not? If you can get a good, reliable service, who won't take the car and drive and spend money on gasoline? I mean, people want to reach cheaper, faster, and more reliable way. And not cutting service, I can imagine it must be a very strategic and big decision, because many agencies face pressure, and first thing they do to reduce costs, they cut the service. So it would be a very big strategic decision at that time. And I can imagine like taking that decision by the CEO and the team. It must be like really a big statement out there saying we are not reducing service because people need to still travel and we'll help.
It was indeed. Yeah.
Great. Now, another big thing, which I'm a big fan of SORTA, is like you rightly mentioned, 85% with fare. But what SORTA did, which is very unique, is you got approval about this Hamilton County sale tax, share in the Hamilton County sale tax. And actually it is now covering 60% of your overall revenue, which is amazing. And it was approved in spring of 2020. So I think public transit is a social cause. So it helped to drive economic growth in the city. But even in the mid-sized city of Europe and all, a lot of cities are not able to recover fare box and facing problem with the funding and not having support from the government and grant. Can you share the structure of revenue collection, as it's a very interesting model that you are still collect fare, but at the same time, you have funding available through these sales tax and other mechanisms so that it can reinvest. And what lesson you can suggest for other mid-sized transit city? Because sometimes people say, oh, it can work in Cincinnati, probably it's not for my city. But do you want to share like how other city can follow this?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, let me just point out that our budget is about $150 million a year.
Yeah.
But we also have a special fund that we call Transit Infrastructure Fund, which totals about $35 million a year or so, separate from the 150. And the Transit Infrastructure Fund is mainly for roadway improvements, and we can talk about that more later on. You're right that in May 2020 we passed a levy, which helped tremendously, obviously.
Yeah.
Before May 2020, most of our budget was dependent on income tax. So anybody who worked in the city of Cincinnati would pay 0.3 cent income tax that would go to SORTA, to us. And this generated about $55 to $60 million a year.
Okay.
And back then, our overall budget was about $105 million, up until 2-3 years ago. The income tax that we were collecting, $55 to $60 million a year, was not enough to maintain the level of service we had at that time, let alone expand our service and add new services and facilities. And we knew we were way behind in all of that. So we had to go out to the public, and basically we needed more money so we can expand the service, make improvements, et cetera, et cetera. And the levy that we introduced was, we'll stop the income tax. So no more income tax, that's the 0.3. And instead, we will have a countywide sales tax, that the 0.8 cent sales tax that will come to SORTA.
Yeah.
However, 0.6 of the 0.8 will go towards operating the buses for the transit agency. And the difference, the 0.2, will go towards the Transit Infrastructure Fund. To help improve roadways, sidewalks, and so on, which will also help transit because you'll have better roadways, better sidewalks,
connectivity,
bus, and so on. So that 0.6 that we're keeping for operating the buses is generating about $100 million a year. So that's about $45 million increase from the income tax. And this additional revenue was key to all of these improvements that we've done in the past couple of years, and everything else that's coming in the near future. And whether it's for adding new additional services, modernizing our fleet, introducing bus rapid transit, as well as introducing mobility on demand service and building new transit facilities. So this is what the sales tax is doing for our communities, allowing us to provide all of these enhanced services. The difference between the two models, the income versus the sales tax, the income was constrained to only those who worked within the city of Cincinnati.
Yeah.
Right? The sales tax is countywide, so anybody, whether you live or if you're a visitor and you're spending money in Hamilton County, you're going to pay that sales tax. That's how it's generating. I think one factor that really helped passing that levy was, the combination of two things. One is we needed better transit system. I mean, the community believed that they need better transit system. And the other piece was the Transit Infrastructure Fund.
Yeah.
So, that's going to improve the roadway for everybody, the sidewalks, intersections, and so on. So everybody was benefiting from that, even if you don't ride the bus. The main message that we had at that time wasn't focused on improving transit. the message for the levy and the message that we're carrying on right now as part of our Reinventing Metro is about is economic development. So
Amazing.
the message that we're driving, so if you go to our website and you look at our Reinventing Metro and all presentations that we do at public, hearings and public meetings and so on, the first thing we talk about is, Reinventing Metro is about economic development, is about, bringing new businesses to our community, is providing better access to more jobs, providing access to higher paying jobs, and investments, as well as mobility for everybody, etc. And then to do all of that, we need better transit system. So even if you don't ride transit and you're a business owner, you know that your employees need to use transit to come to and to work. So you're going to support that message. You're going to support that levy, even though you really don't ride transit. So that it was that combination that really helped us pass that levy and get the support of the community.
Amazing. I mean, it's so powerful, and that's what I feel transit agency need to focus on branding sometime. Because if you just go out and say, hey, we need money for buses, people will probably not agree to it, and they see as a burden. But instead of saying transit, but you focus on the bigger picture, and which is very true. I mean, transit bring prosperity to the city and economic development. I was talking with one of the city where they are looking how they can attract new employer, and the first thing employer asks is, do you have transit for my employees to come?
Exactly.
If you don't have, how will I set up my business? Because many of them can't afford cars, and many of them can't, and they live outside the city because they can't live in the city. They can't afford to live in the city, so they live outside. They need to come. So, do you have transit? And if their answer is no, the business will never come. So it's really powerful. And one thing I wish after listening to you is like, how can we just replicate this model to all other transit authority? I know it's not easy, but anything you want to say, easy. Like how can you do that?
I wish it was easy, believe me.
I can, or probably we need to create your clones and send to each city. Now, other thing which I really found interesting from your profile, and actually thanks for sharing that copy. Last time you gave me the copy of your book, and I was very curious. Okay, you have wrote a book. I thought it'll be probably talking about transit and buses and all. And I start reading it, and I completed the book in a day. Generally, I never do that because it's hard to focus. I left everything. I didn't do any work that day. And I just read the book. And the title of your book is The Implosion of Public Transport and Case for Infinite Game. And I was like, what is this infinite game all about? So would strongly recommend everybody to read that book. I'll share the link in the notes. Now, I want to know, what do you mean by the infinite game for the public transit? And what inspired you to write that book?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for, plugging my book here, I really appreciate that. And thank you for reading it and the kind comments you made. I started working on this book actually before COVID.
Oh, okay.
So back in 2017, I started getting a bit uneasy about transit. I mean, I've been in the transit industry for 28 years now. So my entire career is in transit. And as I said earlier, started in the public, then went private, then came back to public. So I've kind of like seen quite a bit of it, and I've seen the trends and so on. But I was getting a bit bothered in 2017 that things are not heading in the right direction.
Yeah.
Not necessarily for a particular agency, but across the industry, right? And no matter whether it's a small agency, big agency, and so on. And I started thinking hard at really what are these reasons? And of course, you can't come up with an answer immediately, but for over months, just thinking about it and putting down some notes and so on. I thought at that time that I'm starting to put my finger on a few things, just based on my experience and throughout my career, and then start come up with an outline of the things I want to discuss in the book, and then started writing it fully after I've gathered all my information between 2018 and 2019.
Yeah.
In 2020, I wrote the book and published it very early part of 2021. Now, the title of my book is made up of two phrases, right, which you already read. So the implosion of public transit.
Yeah.
That's one. And the case for an infinite game. That's the other phrase. The first part, implosion of public transit, and I use that word implosion on purpose because really the demise of transit is from within.
Yeah.
It's not other forces from the outside that are attacking transit on purpose or are actively trying to destroy it. No, it's, the destruction of transit is happening because we, the transit agencies and transit industry are failing to cope with the changings that are, happening at every level. Meaning, every level, whether it's the new technologies, the serious use of data analytics, whether it's the training and development of staff, the unique mobility solutions, etc. So it's at all of these different levels. And as an example, I think, in my book, I talk about, the SpaceX company, right? So it took SpaceX 6 years to put a rocket in orbit.
Into the orbit.
From when it was started as a company, right? Same thing with Tesla. It took them 5 years to launch, the first car. Yet we, transit industry, we're still trying to figure out, how to solve first and last mile.
Yeah.
And we've been at it for like almost 20 years now, right? So it's, these things that are changing around us, right? Around the transit industry, whether it's the population, demographics, the young generation preferences, technology, and so on. If we don't change, then we will cease to exist. And this is what, Jack Welch, the former CEO of GE, once said, if the rate of change on the outside is greater than the rate on the inside, then, the end is near. And that's why it's the implosion, because we're not changing from the inside. And that's why we're imploding on ourselves. So we have to do things differently. And the second phrase of the book, and the case for an infinite game, is that solution to prevent that implosion. And the infinite game really is the solution to our problems, or at least what I perceive as problems, in my book. And to succeed and turn the transit ship around, we have to start acting with the mentality of an infinite game player. And in a nutshell, we have to make investments when they are not needed.
Oh, yeah.
And that has always been an issue for many industries, including transit, for some obvious reasons, they have, funding and so on. But that's really the crux of the infinite game mentality is you need to make investments when you don't actually need them. And we have to create that culture in the industry, in the transit industry. We have to create that culture that keeps reinventing itself and reinventing transit. We cannot wait for something happening outside of transit for us to react to, such as, oh, now we have Uber, they're competing against us, they're taking our passengers, now we need to find a solution. You're already late in the game.
Yeah.
If you're trying to catch up, you're late. By the time you solve the Uber problem, something else is going to be popping up, right? And we keep playing that catch-up game. Instead, we have to drive the industry, and we have to drive that environment around us. We shouldn't be in a reactionary mode. Rather, we have to be in the driver's seats. And And that's where, invest in the technology, invest in the training and the development, so on. Because when it's time that you need these, you have them, and you can deal with whatever immediately. So that's really the crux of the book, really.
No, I like that book also for one more reason, which I didn't share with you, but I want to share now, is like, it's also for a person. What you talk about in that book is the rate of change outside and rate of change inside. Is every human being. I mean, the world is changing, the technology is changing so far. So as a human being also, we need to adapt to the new technology. If we don't do that, we will go away and we will cease. And that's what I feel is, it's not only, if you want to change the organization, you need to first change the people. And by changing, I doesn't mean that you need to replace them, but it's like reskilling them. So investment in reskilling, understanding and learning new technology. It's not when you start that, like many agencies, I remember we did a training in 2019 on electric buses, and many agencies said, oh, we don't want to implement for next 10 years, so it's not for us. And I feel like, but you need to learn now. If you really want to do in next 5 years, it's not tomorrow, like you will learn and you go out in the market. So I think that's a very powerful statement. I like I said, I strongly suggest everybody. That's why I wrote a small article about that book, so that people can understand what it is. But it has some of the great points. And thank you for putting together your knowledge and experience of 28 years in such a small, condensed way, I would say.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I wanted to make it short so it's easy to read.
I love that, because people don't want to read stories. It has to be short. It has to be to the point, and that's what the whole point is. So now the other point I want to discuss with you, which is all the transit agencies, not only in North America but everywhere around the world, is facing problem, is a staff shortage. After the pandemic, every agency has the driver shortage issue, the worker issues, the manpower issue. And again, kudos to SORTA, because I saw your report and you clearly, transparently share how many trips you are missing every day because of the driver shortage. And it's around 100 trips, even though your performance is very good because you are doing 95% of a rate. But even if you solve this problem of manpower, your performance will be 99.5%. So it's like causing such a big dent in the performance just because of staff shortage. So it's a big challenge. Everybody understand that we are facing problem with the driver and the operators and all. Now, what are the steps you are following to address this challenge? Because a lot of agencies want to solve this problem in 6 months, and I tell them it's a long-term problem. You can't just solve it in a 6 month. And do you think it's a long-term issue, or how will we address this challenge?
Yeah, another important question, Jaspal, and thanks again for these great questions. I mean, we're just like anybody else. We are having drivers shortage issues. We've been suffering, from that for the past couple of years or so. And the problem is really twofold, right? When it comes to missing trips and the level of service.
Yeah.
First is difficulty in finding new hires, right?
Yeah.
But then also it's the retention of drivers. So case in point, last year we hired 170 drivers. We netted 3. Because, you have retirements, people retiring, people getting fired because they're on their cell phone when they shouldn't be, on their cell phone, or some, other issues. So we hired 170, but we netted 3. So retention is as critical as recruiting. So it's, these two issues that kind of, go hand in hand. And we try, we did a few measures trying to entice, more people to apply and work. And we're making some headway. We still have a long way, just, because that's how the economy is nowadays. I agree with you. That's not a problem that's going to be solved in the next, 4, 5, 6 months. It's probably going to take at least a year and a half, depending on the economy as well. But a few things that we did that seem to be helping. One is we raised the drivers' salaries by 25%.
25%.
That was, a big jump. it went from like 16 point some dollars an hour to 20 point some dollars an hour. This is starting rate. And that obviously helped, somewhat. But we also relaxed the hiring requirements. So, for example, you don't have to have a CDL to apply. We will train you to get your CDL, and we will pay for your CDL exam as well. And that's worth a few $1,000s, right? We also restructured how we do the extra board. So to make it a little bit more attractive, because usually, extra board, you have no idea when you're going to be called in, and what, when you're going to drive and so on. It has its issues. So we kind of structured that more into shifts. So, you can pick a shift for extra board and you just go there. So at least, on every day, I'm going to be there from this hour to that hour. I may be called on to drive. I may not be called on to drive, but that's my shift.
Yeah.
Right? Just sitting there and waiting. That also helped people, to at least structure their daily activities, right, and their daily lives. So that, these kind of combination, kind of seem to have helped a little bit. But, we're still having issues in recruiting fast enough, basically. But for the past, I think, 3 months or so have been relatively good months of recruiting. So I think we're heading in the right direction, but it's still going to take a while until we're almost back to normal.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
Ahead.
No, I was just saying, there was a report I read a report by APTA which say that 45% of drivers are the age of 55. So the outflow is greater than the inflow. So the challenge you're saying is absolutely right.
Yes. The one major reason for the large number of missed trips, certainly, shortage of drivers is one factor, but in our case specifically, it's due to absenteeism. That's what's really driving the missed trips that high. We've been dealing with that for the past several months, and it's kind of like a bit more under control now. If you check our January and especially now in February, number of missed trips have gone down drastically.
Oh, amazing!
Trying to keep that momentum. Hopefully, we'll continue that success. So that's what we're doing in that regards.
No, that's great. Thanks for sharing like how you recruiting people without the CDL, because it's a barrier. A lot of people don't know how to get the CDL, and then investing that money to get a license because they're not sure whether they will get a job or not after getting a CDL. So what you're reducing, you're lowering down that barrier, you're hiring people. In fact, in your book, you also mentioned that we should hire more people with customer service experience and turn them into driver, because that's a way you have a best driver on board.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, because and those in the transit industry, gets it, because the driver is really doing two things. He or she is driving a bus, but they're also being, as customer service, staff, right? I mean, that's the first thing that passengers see. It's very easy to learn how to drive a bus. Anybody can learn, right? Just, give them a few weeks, few months, they'll learn how to drive a bus. But to be customer friendly and have the right attitude, that's not so easy to teach, right? So if you recruit from that sector, of the customer service, or the service sector, individuals who already have that quality, it's easier to teach them to drive a bus, and you have the best of both worlds.
But the problem is people think other way. People think it's easy to get the driving license or the customer experience than getting a driving license. But what you rightly mentioned, it's difficult to have that attitude, customer service. You should be passionate about transit, because then the customer will use the bus again and again. I know if you go board a bus and driver give you a weird look, you will never want to go back. But if you go into the bus and driver have a fun with you, fun chat with you, welcoming, smiling face, people feel happy and they feel safe.
Exactly.
Some of the countries are thinking the automation can be one of the solution to address this driver and operator shortage issue. Like some of the countries are doing pilot on autonomous buses. In fact, FTA recently released a grant funding for ADAS, Automated Driver Assisted System Program. What do you think about autonomous buses? Will it be good for city and can address this challenge, or you think that's not going to make big difference?
No, I mean, all of these solutions are good solutions and they have their place. And that's certainly something that's, on our radar screen, not in the short term, just because we're busy now. We're busy trying to finish the infrastructure that we have, right? The foundation of all of that. But no, I mean, autonomous buses as well as, autonomous vehicles, they have a role in the transit industry and in providing, that kind of service. We just want to make sure that they can be implemented in a meaningful way and, an efficient way as well. Some of these applications, it's easy to do in certain areas in this country with certain infrastructure. It's more difficult in other areas due to terrain, weather, and so on. But I think ultimately we're going to get there. I think federal highway, things that by 2035 or 2040, something like that, most of the vehicles will be almost autonomous vehicles.
Yeah.
Just because it's going to take some time to weed out most of the other vehicles where you cannot retrofit the vehicle with the equipment to drive itself. So I think the nation and that's where everything is it's heading in that direction, and we will get there as a transit industry. And yeah, there will be benefits. That doesn't mean that it's going to take jobs away from others. Those would be retrained, they'll be used in other capacities and so on.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And when people say it will take away job, I say, man, there are no drivers available. So it's not a problem of job, it's a problem of we don't have people. So if you don't have people, you have to use technology. It's not possible to survive. Now, one other thing your role is, and I'm very surprised seeing like you're managing 3 different roles in the organization, and innovation is one of your key role. And I'm really always passionate about technology and innovation in mobility. And I see the use of big data, big analytics, data analytics, artificial intelligence, mass, blockchain. It's going to increase. Now, SORTA has launched various initiatives. I'm curious to know, how do you identify and evaluate new technology and approaches? Because one of the important points you made in the beginning is you need to be future ready. You don't need to implement project or technology when it's available. You need to think about it before it became available to everybody. So how SORTA take care of this future long-term planning? And one of the key challenge with the organization, with the transit agency, especially, is the change management. You have people who don't want to change. So, and you suddenly bring new technology to them and say, hey, this is a new tool, we need to play with it. How do you manage this both balance of implementing technology at the same time, managing the manpower?
Yes, good question. And it is an important area for us, SORTA, as well. Should be for all transit industry. As you said, I mean, I already mentioned that we have to make these investments in technology when we really don't need them, right? But we need to get there. In terms of what we're doing, one of the first things that I did when I came here to SORTA is because I used to do that when I was a consultant. I created the strategic ITS plan, which encompasses all different technologies that we have that we are getting and that we need to get, in the short term and the long term future as well. So that's one complete document, strategic plan that talks about all of that, the impacts, how it's going to impact each, the departments, the staff, the public, and the agency, and what is anything else that we're planning on implementing, right, in terms of services and so on. So that's critical. But also in terms of how we use the data. It's unfortunate that most transit agencies, we collect tons of data, but many of us don't really use it to its fullest. We're kind of like using, not even 10% of the potential of that data.
Yeah.
We have to get deep into that. We have to have the right tools for that. Two things that, that we're doing here at SORTA. One is we're building a comprehensive dashboard, Power BI dashboard. So we have the infrastructure in place. Now we're building the dashboard that will have pretty much every piece of data that we collect, whether it's from your typical CAD, AVL, on-time data, passengers counting, arrival time, departure times, and all of that, but also from the finance department, from the procurement department, from maintenance, from operations, what have you, it's there. And it's, eventually it'll be open to every employee in the agency, no matter what their rank is, because we want everybody to look at it and understand what's going on a daily basis. Great. It'll be structured kind of like a tree map, easy to look at and figure out, where the issues are within a second or two, right? But also will allow you to drill down until you've tried to figure out, the what's causing that issue, right? So that we can act, immediately on this. So providing that level of data is an analysis is critical for any agency. At the same time, at least in my area for the planning department, we are also automating the monitoring of certain data. So for example, the typical route, there's tons of data that we're collecting, right? In terms of on-time performance, the dwell time of buses at certain bus stops, arrival time, load factors and all of that. And sometimes, these things fluctuate, right? And you're collecting tens of thousands of these data every day because you have so many different routes, trips, etc. But it's difficult to notice that at a particular stop, dwell time has been increasing, right? Or for the past several weeks, dwell time used to be, maybe like 35 seconds. Yeah. Now it's 2.5 minutes or 3 minutes. And that's been consistent for the past 2 or 3 weeks. So we need, we're building that, smartness into it to immediately flag it like, hey, watch out, there's something happening there, right?
Yeah.
So we go and we look into it and we find, lo and behold, there's a new passenger there who's in a wheelchair. And now by deploying the ramp and that's adding 2 or 3 minutes to the schedule. So we need to make adjustments to the schedule so that the buses don't, count as being late, right? So we need to make these adjustments. And there are, many of these examples, whether it deals with load factors, and travel times and all of that. So we need to keep building, that intelligence to notice these variances and flag them immediately so we can react to it before it becomes a problem. Again, infinite game, you want to be ahead of the game, right? So you fix it before it becomes a problem and before you get a black eye from the customers, right? Because everybody on, waiting at the next stop, like the bus has been running, 3 minutes late every single day, and I'm waiting here, in the rain, right? So that's, the kind of things that, we're working on, and we want to see more of that happening as well.
Well, that's a very important point to raise about, like, we generate tons of data, but we never interlink those data. Like that's a beautiful example. I never thought about the increase in dwell time because there is a new passenger and he need more support. but it impacting the whole schedule, the frequency and the reliability. So probably you need to have better dynamic process to adjust the schedule so that people frequency doesn't disturb, people get the buses at the interval. And I was thinking about how to link the data of your maintenance activity with your on-time performance. So sometimes we don't see the impact of maintenance activity on the on time. So there is a lot of thing one can do with the data. And I agree with you. We are still scratching the surface. And that's what I tell when I worked with Uber for some time, and I used to tell people why Uber car is there when you need it, because they don't wait for the demand to put the car there. They already tell the driver that we are expecting so many people will demand from this area and this many cars should be there. So it's all about predictive analysis and data and interlinking different things and do it. Now, my next question, I'm telling you honestly beforehand, I asked ChatGPT, what should I ask Khalid? And I got this question from ChatGPT. So I said, okay, let me include and ask, what do you think about it? So SORTA has recently launched this new fare payment system, Cincy EZfare, in partnership with Transit app, and that's allow rider to pay fare using the app. Now, ChatGPT want to know, can you discuss the process of developing and implementing this system and how it has been received by the rider, like how riders are asking, liking it or not? The other thing it asks is like, what is your plan for future? Are you looking to implement open loop payment system? Are you looking to develop a mass application for Cincinnati? So what are the future goals?
Yeah, so the fare payment app that we have is actually the Masabi app.
Okay.
It's the Masabi fare payment.
So it means ChatGPT is wrong.
We're just calling it EZfare.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a consortium of public agencies in Ohio. And through that, we contracted with Masabi and Transit app. So it's kind of like a joint contract with both. So we have, these two apps. And actually, you don't need the Masabi app because through the Transit app, you can buy your EZfare, right?
Okay.
So the Transit app is also connected to the Masabi one, behind the scenes, right? And we wanted just to simplify things for the user so they don't have to jump from one app to the other. So you go to the Transit app, you can plan your trip and then buy your fare, which is through the Masabi system anyway. We did that back in 2019. And, the implementation went very well. I was managing that implementation. And, we started it on October 1st of 2019. Since then, we've also retrofitted our vehicles with the readers.
Okay.
Because the initial implementation, for the first year, the passengers would show their cell phones to the driver, and they say, okay, fine, you have the pass or the ticket, and so you board. But we weren't capturing the data, right? So we were successful in getting some grant money, and we did retrofit the entire fleet with these readers. So now passengers, scan and they ride, and we're capturing that data. And through, my staff and myself working with them, actually we use this data, the readers data, which you only scan when you get on. So you only have boardings data, right? But we managed to come up with a sneaky way to figure out origin and destinations. So we use, the readers data to generate origin destination, which we use in our planning activities as well. And we're pretty confident of that, the process that we're doing. It's not easy trying to link, figure out you got here, got off there, but
yeah,
may not be a perfect match. So there's, so we're using that in that regard. Right now, we're working with the other agencies, in that consortium to implement fare capping.
Okay.
We're doing fare capping and also e-wallet. So you will have the wallet as well, which is, I think pretty much everybody knows what that is. Instead of buying a pass, you can put $20 on, and then use it as you ride. So we're doing these two things as well. in terms of the mobility as a service, yeah, and basically we are in heading in that direction. The current app, just transit app, when you plan your trip, it gives you all the typical options, driving, walking, transit, Uber, red bike, and so on.
Yeah.
We are right now in the middle of implementing our new mobility on demand service, which will start in May of this year in 2 zones, and then we'll expand it to 4 more. So right now in the middle of implementing that. The vendor for the software is Via, and they're already working with transit. So when you go to plan your mobility on demand trip, you would still go to the transit app. And the transit app will give you the mobility on demand option among the other options as well. And then you can pick whichever option you want. And that's the direction we want to maintain is, it's one stop shop, right? You go there to that app, whether it's transit app or whatever,
yeah,
you get all the different options you want. And from that app, you'll pay your fare as well.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I think that's very important because a lot of agencies don't use the rider data, the fare collection data, and you're using it for origin destination. You can plan your route better. You can understand what is the demand, what time, and which service. So I can imagine how you are using it. The other important point you mentioned in the beginning is that SORTA is investing a lot in BRT system. You are now investing in 4 BRT corridor, and basically you're covering all the popular transit route, each of which carry more than 1 million rider a year. So it means you want to give a better reliability and service. Just want to understand, can you tell me the benefits and challenges of implementing this system? Because BRT used to be popular, then it went down, but I see a lot of cities in North America is now coming back and implementing BRT network, and how it fit into the strategic plan of SORTA, because your strategic plan is how to provide better service, economic development for the city. And if I may add one small point to it, are you looking to make these corridor electrified and automated, or you don't have plan to go into that direction right now?
Yeah. So as part of our reinventing Metro plan, the system restructuring and so on, one element of that is the BRT, bus rapid transit. And in that plan, it's identified 4 potential corridors for the BRT. All 4 seem to be conducive for a BRT system. However, we can't do all 4 at the same time. Just the complexity of that, the logistics of it, and the cost, obviously.
Oh yeah.
So we're doing a study. We're at the tail end of the study. We should finish that in the next 2-3 weeks. The study is looking at all 4 corridors, and we selected the first 2 we're going to implement.
Okay.
2, which we made public, in the couple months ago. And right now, the consultants are just, doing the LPA, the locally preferred alternative, in terms of the alignment, location of stations, and so on. And we've been busy with the outreach for the past few days with that. So we identified the 2 corridors, and then we'll just follow the typical FTA, route, which is the project development, construction, and then operations. Now, in terms of challenges, I think the biggest challenge would be having dedicated lanes, not for the entire corridor, and we realize that's not going to happen. There are different limitations, everywhere, but we need at least 50% or more, to be bus lanes, right? So that's going to probably be the biggest challenge. We have good relationship with the cities. That's not going to be the main hurdle. In some of these corridors, it's a bit constrained, and especially if we want to go in the center lane, that's going to be a problematic. It's going to be a problem just because, again, the right of way. That's where we see our biggest challenges are. In most, I don't want to say most, but in some other communities, one of the challenges is that the public outcry, right? Here, it seems it's the other way around. When part of that's, the BRT study, I had assembled, what we call the stakeholders advisory committee, and that included mayors and city managers from the different communities along these 4 corridors. And when we made the announcement of which 2 corridors we're going to select, one of the mayors got pretty upset and literally just, packed up his stuff and left the meeting because his corridor was not selected. He wanted it there. And when we were doing the surveys, before that, talking to the public, about what, where, whether they want BRT and where they live and so on, and which corridors they would choose, I think it was 86% lived along the corridors that they picked for a BRT. So they wanted to be, next to where they live or work. So it's not something like, no, don't bring it here, I don't want it. They were embracing it. So the biggest challenge, as I said, would be, getting the right of way for the bus lanes. In terms of, I think the last part you asked about the.
Are you looking to implement electric buses and autonomous fleet? Because if you have a dedicated right of way, that can be a good option for autonomy. Yes,
we are currently also doing an alternative fuel study.
Okay.
Because we realize that diesel buses, that's not going to be the answer for the next, many years to come, if you can still buy them, in 10 years from now, right? So we are doing a study that will help us determine, shall we go with, battery, operate buses or electric buses, or fuel cell, hydrogen. We're not considering CNGs. So it's either hydrogen or BEVs. And we expect, that recommendation to be made in the next month and a half. So I can't tell you whether it's going to be, we're going to have electric buses or fuel cell. What I can tell you is it's going to be zero emission.
Right? That's great.
So yeah, in either case, it's going to be zero emission. I don't know which of these 2 technologies, we will end up selecting until that study is done. In terms of automated buses, as I said earlier, that's certainly something on our radar screen, but not for many years to come. But that's something that we are definitely interested, not only along the BRT corridors, but in other communities as well. We have few neighborhoods where we think automated vehicles would be a good solution for these neighborhoods.
Yeah, no, and also I think the challenge is the technology is not ready yet. So let the big city implement it and experiment, and then the mid-sized city can adopt it because the cost of it. Now I want to go back to your book. In your book you mentioned about that riding transit is not driven by the socioeconomic or demographic characteristic, but more by whether it meets the individual preference. Because generally transit agencies think other way. They just look at who is the demographic profile, how they live, and they just plan the service. And one powerful line, which is end of your book, is the successfulness of a transit system is the percentage of choice rider, not the forced rider, because there are a lot of people who are forced to use transit. But you said, if you really want to call yourself a successful system, it should be the percentage of choice rider, people who are using it. And you recommended that transit agencies should use spatial analysis and shared many tools. I in fact check all of them, like how one can use that. Can you share more about this? And one I'm interested is to learn some use cases, because you shared some of the interesting use cases. What could be the use cases of using spatial analysis and how it can be useful for transit?
Yeah, now you're making me too excited now.
I can see that you love the point.
Oh yes. It's one of my areas of expertise. So so regarding the first point in terms of the preferences, and you are right that we in the transit industry, when we're doing analysis and so on, typically we look at the socioeconomic, demographics, densities, and all of that, and say, oh yeah, this is where we need to put service, and that's fine to a degree, right? But I've fell in that trap myself, right? Thinking that yeah, we can improve on this by doing some regression here and there and so on, but at the end of the day, it doesn't give you the right answer.
Yeah.
Because if you just look at the socio-economic demographic kind of analysis, there may be two neighbors, right, that are only 100 feet apart or 30 meters apart, where one has to be at his job at 8 a.m. So he takes the 7 a.m. bus.
Yeah.
That's only around the corner. Great. His neighbor works at a factory, and she has to be there at 6 a.m., which means she has to take the 5 a.m. bus.
Yeah.
But there is no 5 a.m. bus. The first trip is at 5:45 a.m. and it takes her an hour to get there. So she can't use the service, right? So even though they live right next to each other, they make each make $50,000. They have the same characteristics, but their preferences is different, right? So it works for one and doesn't work for the other. On the other hand, I may be living in some really nice neighborhood making $150,000, and I own 4 cars, but I would still take transit because I care about the environment, right? So my preference is completely different. Or in some cases, I really don't want to deal with the stress. I can't deal with the stress of driving and so on. I'm going to leave that to somebody else to do the driving while I read or answer emails. So it has nothing to do with the socioeconomic and demographics. That's if we want to be a really successful transit agency and have a good system. So then you need to look at the preferences, what people prefer, what time they need to make their trips. Yeah. Some people, if the bus comes once every hour, good enough for me, right? Other people, no, I want the bus every 15 minutes. If I miss one, I'm not going to wait an hour. I'm going to wait 15 minutes, fine. So these are preferences. The cleanliness of the buses, right? The information, where the bus goes, how fast it goes. If I don't have a car, I'm only making, $25,000. It's going to take me an hour and a half to get to my job. Well, so be it, right? But others, they have different preferences. So, and that's the way of getting people out of their cars and onto transit, is you need to meet these preferences so that they will ride. Granted, there are a segment that will never drive, will never ride transit, and that's fine. That's, we accept that fact. But, we have to meet people's preferences to attract them to transit. And that's what I argue in my book. And that's why I say the success of a transit agency should be measured by the percentage of choice riders rather than just, total ridership. Because captive riders have different preferences, right, than choice riders. Captive ones, they just need a bus to come and get them, right, to their destination. If there's an hour frequency, I don't care. If I have to walk half a mile, I'll walk the half a mile. I'm going to ride no matter what. Choice riders, they have other set of preferences and needs. Yeah. They want better frequency. They want clean buses, courteous drivers, information, entertainment on board the buses, and so on. So the fact that you have more choice riders, it means that you are providing a way better service. That's meeting not only the captive riders' expectation, but it's also meeting the choice riders' expectation. So I think that should be the measure, really.
No, I love that point. That's why I noted that point is like you need to have more and more choice rider if you really want to build a successful system. Sorry, you were adding something more.
No, I think the last point the last part of that question was the spatial analysis. And so with spatial analysis and, more specifically, the modeling, is it's a huge field, right? And for which hasn't really penetrated into the transit industry in terms of practice, right? There's tons of research out there, like spatial optimization, modeling, and so on. Tons of research, but we haven't been good at applying it. And but I try to do that where I work. So I'll give you two examples. One example was at one of the transit agencies I worked. I looked at the downtown area in terms of bus stops. So we have, don't quote me on these numbers, but I think maybe like some 200 bus stops within the downtown area. And that's way too many bus stops, right? Because stoppage, delays, double time, and impacts and so on. So if we want to minimize the number of bus stops, how can we minimize the number of bus stops, but still serve the, all of that population, 100% of the population, while at the same time making sure nobody is going to walk more than 3 minutes or 4 minutes, right? So you have these constraints or these limitations. So you could do that in different ways with, optimization modeling. And it turned out that to still cover, I think it was 95 or 97% of the population, and nobody was going to walk more than 4 minutes, instead of the 200 bus stops, you only need 112 bus stops. So it was like almost more than 45% reduction in bus stops. Well, that's not only infrastructure.
45%, that's huge.
45, almost 45% reduction. And you're still covering, almost 100%, and nobody's going to walk more than 4 minutes to a bus stop. Now, to do that manually, it's impossible because you have millions of different combinations, right? And this is just looking at 200 bus stops. So imagine looking at, your entire system with 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 bus stops, and you're trying to optimize all of that. But the same can be applied to routing and, other service areas. I talked about mobility on demand, that we are implementing mobility on demand right now. We did a study last year trying to figure out, where we should implement mobility on demand. And I made it a requirement for the consultants to use spatial optimization modeling as part of their analysis. So they did, involve a professor who's, this is one of his specialties, is transit spatial optimization. And we did use that technique and making sure that the zones are contiguous, then the most efficient shape for the travel, and to minimize, the travel times and the distances within each zone. So we did that, we used that in our study, and these are the zones that we are implementing right now. But the application of spatial analysis and, spatial optimization modeling is just, limitless to when it comes to transit. Almost in everything we can use that.
I agree with you. I mean, thanks for sharing these two use cases. And now I can see, like, managing bus stop is a huge cost for transit agency, because if your bus stops are dirty, people create a negative impression about that. Instead of that, have less bus stop, better service, and more frequent service. Even people need to walk for 2-3 minutes. That will be easier to access, but the space should be good. And if you have too many bus stop, managing infrastructure, it's another pain for transit agency. It's not easy. So reducing 45%, that's a huge achievement. I mean, that can reduce their cost for maintaining. The staff can better, the buses don't need to stop every stop, because that's also delay the whole service, acceleration and deceleration. And then using this analysis. So thanks for sharing. It's really nice. Like I said, getting some good practical example. It's really nice. Now, my next question is, you already shared about your background, that how you started in transit, like how you started your study at Ohio University and then went to COTA and then went to Jacksonville and all, and continued to work. You went out to private, came back to public, work in Abu Dhabi, Makkah. So it's a great experience so far. Now, my question is, what inspired you to pursue a career in public transportation? And what has been the most rewarding experience in the field? Because if you're continuing for last 28 years, there is something you must be feeling really proud of, or some reward you're getting. So beside money, because money is not you keep you in the job. So what is your so far rewarding experience in the field?
No, thank you. And I think I kind of like touch on the first part of your question. I think what inspired me to pursue, the career in transit, it was pure chance, right? So one day I'm sitting in, the master's course in transportation, and the professor says there's an internship opening at COTA, the Central Ohio Transit Authority in Columbus, Ohio, and they need, somebody who, from the program, and there was some programming, capabilities. And I, took several programming courses in different languages, and so it was just a hobby on my part. So I applied. I got the internship in the planning department there, and a few months later, I became a full-time employee, and the rest is history.
Yeah.
And it was very rewarding. I mean, it is a very, very rewarding experience. In terms of the most rewarding experience, you're right. It's not money, and to me specifically, yes, I've done tons of intelligent transportation systems across the country. I've designed and built transit centers, facilities, all over, network redesign, all of that. These are great achievements, but I think the most rewarding thing for me is having developed my staff here and in my previous jobs, because I can see the successes, that they've been having, and where they are right now, whether it's from Jacksonville or Abu Dhabi, and even in Mecca, and here as well. That really what makes me happy at the end of the day is seeing all of these young generations, and the impact that I had on them, and I'm sure that they also have impact on me. I think that's really, for me, that's the most rewarding thing.
Amazing. In fact, you have put that line in your book, which is from Mark Andreessen, is A-type manager hire a A-type employee. And the bad manager hire a bad employee because they don't want to promote their employee. They don't want to grow their employee. And I can see, and I can feel the sense of satisfaction, because that's how, I mean, you always need to leave the world in a better position. And how can you do it? By sharing knowledge and replicating success across. So I love your point about helping others and building their careers, and having best of employee under you, and let them become a future manager so that they can grow and change the world.
Exactly.
No, thanks, Khaled. And this is my last question, because you're a technology guy, ITS. So I just want to see, how do you see the AI technology transforming the public transport sector in next 5 to 10 years? What are your prediction for next 5 to 10 years?
Can I flip the question around and ask, how would transit transform AI for its needs? Again, kind of like related to one of my earlier, statements. I'd like to see transit playing that role of driving things, right? Not being in the reactionary mode. But AI still has a major role in our day-to-day lives and activities and so on. But I also think that, again, back to the infinite game mentality, transit needs to establish itself in the AI arena as well. We have to set what we expect from AI. what we expect from AI to provide to us, right? For example, be it as simple as designing a customized travel itineraries for individuals based on their specific preferences, whatever those preferences are, right? Just, like scenic view, not walking, more walking, biking, whatever it is, right? Time of day and all of that. All the way, so from these customized travel itineraries for individuals, but also all the way to intelligently designing whole transit networks that are most efficient and most productive. I would also like, for the AI, for example, take historical transit and traffic data and whatever other data, and to continuously tweak routes. I mean, we talked a little bit about, the bus stops, the dwell time, and so on. But even take it at a grander level, right? Tweaking routes based on the ridership, the changes in the developments around, that corridor, or changes in densities. On, if we're able to get preference data from these residents and what they need, but for the AI to keep tweaking these kind of alignments, routes, and location of bus stops, and to tweak the network as a whole and schedules to provide the best service. It would also be beneficial for AI to also determine, like, in which areas fixed route is the best solution. Versus not so much fixed route in this area, but have, flex route service, would be the better option. Or, mobility on demand in this type of area. And so for all of that, for the AI to start putting together for us, because that's going to save us tons of resources that we can put somewhere else.
Amazing. No, I love your point about it's not the how AI will transform transit, it's how transit want AI to work for it. And that's more, I would say it's very powerful statement, because that's where you be in command. Let outside person to be in command. You became in command and you say, hey, I have these problem. How can I use these technology and innovation to solve my problem? Amazing. I loved our conversation, Khaled. So thank you so much for your time. I know you're busy. Now we have this quick rapid fire question round, and idea for that rapid fire is that we learn about transit, we learn about technology, but we now learn more about you. And if you're ready, I'll start asking this question and want to know, how do you feel and think?
All right, I guess I'm ready.
Okay, my first question, and I think it'll be difficult for you because you never thought, or I don't know if you ever thought about it, that if you were not in transit sector, what other profession you would have selected?
Oh, that's an easy one. Architect.
Oh, is it? Architect?
That has always been my passion, and that's why I studied architecture and undergrad. Yeah.
But we steal you from architecture to transit, which is good for us.
I still get to do both, so I'm happy.
Now you work and you travel around the world. I would love to know, which is your favorite city in the world?
Well, I happened to live in Vienna, Austria, when I was a teenager. So by far, it's Vienna.
It's my favorite too. It's a lovely city.
Yeah.
Really, you can survive with transit and go anywhere. Now you wrote a book, and it means you also must be reading a lot. So which is your favorite book or podcast, or both?
Well, this is a tough one. Not to brag, but in my personal library, I have 3,500 books.
3,500, man. Then like I used to feel proud. I have 50, but now I feel shame.
You have to start from somewhere. But if I have to choose one, I think it would be the Quran.
Yeah.
I
haven't get a chance to read it, but in my home, I have a copy of Quran. I want to read it. I probably will discuss with you one day.
All right.
Yeah.
Great.
Now, my next question is, what one thing do you wish you should have learned early in life?
Probably play a musical instrument.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've been teaching myself for the past 30 years, but it's not easy, at that age.
It's not.
I'm sure had I learned it at a much younger age, it would have been much easier. But yeah, playing a musical instrument.
I don't know. It's a word of encouragement for me or a warning because I just started learning an instrument 3 months back. So I don't know if I should continue.
Yeah, we can talk about this.
My kids, they are 4, they are learning now. So now I feel they can understand much better than. My last question, Khaled. If you can change one thing in your life, what would it be?
That would be probably, if that's like a general question, but
anything. It can be personal, it can be journal, anything.
Yeah, it's, for people to have more compassion. Yeah.
I love that. I think that's world need today, more compassion. I was talking with my wife yesterday and she was saying something about her office. And I said, sometimes people have bad days, people have problems. So we should have more compassion towards other and try to understand it's not same for everybody. So I love that point. And I can relate to it why you love Quran, because that's what Quran teach you, to have more compassion and love for everybody. Thank you so much, Khaled. I mean, I really enjoyed our conversation. I love all the points you shared and all. I'll put your book detail in the note, and I encourage people to read it and enjoy it. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge.
My pleasure. And thank you for having me, Jasper.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. We'll be inviting some other inspiring guests in the coming week. You can subscribe to this podcast online to get the notification for the next episode. If you like this podcast, please don't forget to give us a 5-star rating, as it will help us to spread our message. If you have any feedback or suggestion for this podcast, please do write to us at info@mobility-innovators.com. I look forward to see you next time. Thank you.